Good evening. You're listening to the Extreme Movie Show. I'm your host, Rob. Tonight's episode, Extreme TV, Season 2, Episode 4 of Twin Peaks, that wonderful ABC TV show from 1990 we're reviewing here on Extreme TV, a part of the Extreme Movie Show, where we cover everything from action films to science fiction to horror and a few television selections thrown into an 80s-based YouTube show, if you want to think of it in that term. That's where we grew up in. That's where we like to focus our films are, but we like to branch out to different things. So jumping right into Twin Peaks here. Interesting way to kind of open the show. I think one of the negatives in this episode is there seemed to be a lot of quick cutting where you would have an angle starting off and then they'd go to something else, come back, continue the angle. And it seems like the episodes are getting more TV-fied right now, unfortunately. Overall, a decent episode with some interesting developments, but we've had better Twin Peaks episodes. Starts out where we have Leland Palmer, and he's obviously out of it because he had just murdered somebody and he's getting interrogated here. But he believed that Jacques Renault had killed Laura, and he basically admits to it. Technically, I don't know if he says he does, but in all intents and purposes, it seems that he does it too. And it's an interesting way to start it off because it's kind of this dark scene or whatever. And as I've said before, Twin Peaks does this thing where you'll start off with, say, a goofy segment followed by a serious one to kind of highlight the differences between them. And it's an interesting way to kind of jump back and forth between these states of your watching, because one scene that gets cut in here is Andy, the deputy. Obviously, Lucy's pregnant, or so she says. And Andy asked the doctor who just came out of the interrogation there about a sperm count. And there's this stupid little angle where Andy's supposed to take a copy of Flesh World, produce a specimen, if you will, and then give it to the doctor while the doctor is waiting for him right there. But of course, he bumps into Lucy. She sees the magazine, doesn't say anything. And then when he comes out into the waiting room, his vial slips from his hand and rolls under there, and so he's like on all fours with his butt in the air, and it's, I guess it's supposed to be funny. It really wasn't to me, but Cooper notices his shoes, and there's something about the brand that he bought, which he admits he got from the one-armed man, Philip Gerard, that they're something what they had found. So now they're like, oh, we got to find a one-armed man. But they cut all this in back and forth, so you go from kind of serious, kind of goofy, and it didn't really work for me for it too. But one of the follow-ups they were having also in here too is that when Leland had talked about seeing the photo of Bill, he basically said, hey, look, or Bob, I'm sorry. Yeah, he said, hey, I'd recognize this place when I was a kid, and they were doing some background information of it, and it's a white house, and they don't know who lives there, but they're trying to find it. So they do get a current address for the people that were there before. Now we shift over to probably what we'd call more of the meat and potatoes as far as like what's going on with Audrey, because Ben is walking down this hallway with a lady that maybe, well, she's going to be a new side character. She gets a nice little bit of screen time talking to her about this travel writer that's going to be showing up. But of course, it reminds us about what's going on with Audrey, because when he gets to his office, he's by himself. You have Jean, Jacques' brother, waiting in there. He's got the video of Audrey being bound and gagged, and he's so cool. He's so chill about how he's trying to act as a go-between between One-Eyed Jacques and Audrey. And he's like, do you want my help or not? And he's got that weird Cajun accent going on, but he's very slick. He's definitely a cut above when it comes to bad guys in this town. He seems extremely professional about it. But it looks like he's trying to like double cross or play both sides here too, because he actually kind of wants to get control of One-Eyed Jacques, but he wants Cooper to bring him to ransom. And he says, okay, you're going to get a call at noon the next day. And that's it. So we'll see how that goes, but it's quick, to the point, and that felt like more like Twin Peaks rather than some of the goofy soap opera stuff with Andy. But then we cut to the Double R Diner where you get Donna. She's getting some takeout food. This is pre-Grubhub, but she's basically going to go be seeing the psychotic orchid dealer, grower, if you want to call it that way, because she's working on getting Laura's secret diary from him. Hank's there. He gets information about how this travel writer is going to be coming and visiting. So he goes in this really weird positive panic about picking up flowers and such, and it just doesn't seem like it's in his character. But Hank seems like he's bipolar. I guess he's just extremely excitable, or he's just kind of like stone cold killer. So I don't know what to make of that, but it seemed sort of goofy, like Andy's sperm count issue. So then we cut again to Donna and Harold, the orchid grower. They're drinking. They're talking about Laura. He was reading from the diary, and Donna doesn't know where she wants to go. She's kind of boring. She's kind of dull, but she's got some emotion to her. So even though she's kind of closed off emotionally, the way she presents herself on screen, it's interesting to see what's going on with her and Harold, because Harold's kind of a pretty individual. He's not ugly by any means, but he has a very soft-spoken demeanor about him, but he's obviously a nutcase. He goes into this weird kind of story, which seems kind of on a spiritual side of Twin Peaks that we haven't mentioned too much about how people come to tell him their stories. And it's almost like he's an observer where he's just recording things down, and that'll come into play here shortly. Now, we know that Josie, who had been MIA supposedly shopping, she's coming back from Seattle allegedly with a bunch of bags. Pete's telling her about Catherine dying in the fire. Of course, we haven't seen the body, so is she really dead? Who knows? But they're going to have a service, and we know at this point Josie's up to no good, and we can't stand her for it because she played the victim in the first season really well and really quiet and not speaking too much and allegedly not having command of the English language too well. So put her together with Pete, who's probably the only likable individual so far, down to earth individual. It's pretty interesting to see what's going to happen because things pick up here too. Now, we're talking about cutting back and forth. Again, we get another quick cut where we go into Blackie's office at One Eye Jack's. And the boss who was there at the Leland's department store, the guy that was recruiting Audrey and some of the other ladies to work at One Eye Jack's as sex slaves, he's in there. And what's interesting about Audrey is you can tell she tries to think on her feet and she gets away with it, but not quite all the time, especially when it comes to high stakes stuff like here at One Eye Jack's. Because basically, even though she's all drugged up, she's basically tells Jean that, oh, he hit me. So he shoots him in front of her while she's crying or whatever like that. And he just does it kind of professionally. And it's a TV cut where you see the shot go off, Audrey screams, and then you see his head hit the ground, whatever. But I'm like, wow, that's, again, he's not playing around or whatever. But these quick cuts just kind of make it where it's hard to emotionally kind of get set one approach. It's not like they can do 10 to 15 minutes of one tone and then do something that shifts. It felt like it was more like that in the first season and a lot less in the second now that primetime TV's got a full season for it. Because again, we go from a death here to where Andy and Lucy have a conversation and she's all pissy about seeing the Flesh World magazine. And she goes through the whole story about, this guy, Dick from the department store, who was kind of a stupid, fun character actually on screen. He was kind of neat to watch. But of course, she does the whole female thing. I don't know what I want. And Cooper's like, well, do you want to get back with Andy? And she doesn't know. And it's like, whatever. Now, we get to the plot development of the episode where this stranger comes into the diner and Norman and Hank had, dressed up and everything too. Hank takes the dude's wallet. You see him looking through it, and he's a district attorney. So he's not actually the travel writer. He's somebody that's coming to work on one of the investigations that's going on. You do get a quick scene here where you see Maddie, Donna talking together, and Donna's pissy. She can't stand that Maddie's basically working over James, who thankfully we haven't seen yet because we can't stand him. But basically Donna's like, hey, I need your help to get this diary from Laura's diary from Harold, but if you don't help me, I'm going to do it one way or the other. It doesn't matter. So Donna's very committed to it, but she's also kind of hurt. Maddie's basically saying, hey, nothing's really going on. Maddie's that wallflower type where I feel like she's going to have something big happen with her later on. Not sure what, but she's obviously there. I don't know if she's a major character yet, but it just feels like there's more to her than meets the eye. And Donna, when she's detectiving, it's the best. I really thought Donna and Maddie would have a little bit longer reign as a partners in crime, so to speak, trying to figure stuff out. Maybe we'll get some more of that here with them trying to figure out how to get Laura's diary from Harold. Now, one of the things we talked about with Josie is that she's not who she seems, and that's one thing that Twin Peaks does well. As you see a character and you see where they present themselves in such a way that you get a feeling for how they are as a person, but then you get some other reason for why they do some actions that are not consistent with their character. And a lot of times it's understandable. Most of the adults are having an affair with somebody else. Not everybody, but most of them. And there's something in their past that seems to come up that they can't get over, and it seems to help define a little bit who they are in this internal conflict that they've got going on. And I'm saying this about Josie because we know she's not probably on the up and up here. Something to do with the fire, something to do with the insurance, something to do with she's probably working over Pete, which makes me really pissed. But she shows up and Harry's there and they're having a conversation. She's got this killer, beautiful evening gown on, just extremely sexy and all that too. She gives a lot of quote unquote legitimate reasons for why she wasn't in town for a while, about being whatever. And she acts like she has no idea because Harry's got his cop mind on. There's something stuck in his craw and he can't turn it off. There's a dog with a bone and he's going for it. But when it comes to bone and all that too, she starts basically instigating. Instead of just saying kiss me, she starts saying take me, rip my dress off. So she's basically pulling out all the stops that she can to make him make sweet love to her, to kind of distract him from what's going on too. And of course, it's kind of weird because as soon as they get down to business, the camera pans away to the window and we're starting to have a storm outside. You see this Asian dude watching them through the window and you're like, okay, now it's going somewhere, because we have the Asian invasion coming in with different Asian characters that we don't know fully yet. Of course, we have Josie, who's Asian, allegedly going to Seattle and coming back. So is she really going there for pleasure, for shopping, or is she going there for business, or both? We'll find out. Now, I think the best scene comes up pretty soon after this. The judge has been called in, and he seems to know Lucy and Harry and everybody else there too, and they have all their different introductions for it too. You get a quick scene here where Dick comes in and he gives Lucy a bunch of cash, basically to quote unquote take care of their problem, because again, she's pregnant. So I'm not going to get too specific there. And she tells him to kiss off basically. And I guess it's supposed to be a funny scene, but again, it doesn't seem to be that way to me. But again, if they just did the one scene and then had the judge come in, this would have been much more effective to me. This judge is an older gentleman. Those around in the 80s would recognize him. I believe he was in Killer Clowns from Outer Space. He may have been in Spaced Invaders and a few others. You would recognize him if you watched a lot of movies back then. I don't remember the actor's name off the top of my head, but it's interesting because this judge seems very old school. He comes in and he's the one that's going to be presiding over the murder because Leland allegedly, confessed to killing his daughter. Or I'm sorry, not his daughter, but Jacques, when he snuffed him out with the pillow in the emergency room. So the judge comes in. He's got this character about him. He goes into this minute or two kind of speech where you're like, okay, he's just sort of talking big or whatever. But there's this tone to it and his delivery that I encourage you to go watch. I'm calling it the Vahalla speech, where he basically says, what happened is a tragedy. I'm not going to let that interfere with what's going on, but we're going to raise a glass together in Valhalla and see each other again someday. And there's just something spectacular about it. You just have to experience it. I think it's phenomenal. What distracts you from the awesomeness of this moment is that he's been traveling in this Winnebago. He's got somebody that travels with him, that works with him, not his wife, but it's a law clerk. And she happens to come in as they leave and we all see her. So again, are we introducing a new character in here? She's a stunner. She's gorgeous. Doesn't look like she has a rock on her finger either too. But we talked about the Asian invasion. We get a quick scene here of Ben just kind of standing around in the hotel or the lobby where he's at, and you see this Twin Peaks Tri-County Log Woman Festival or something, where these beauty girls they're going in for a contest, are like walking by and he's trying to talk to one or two and kind of see some guy, getting checked in, and he's Asian with a really, really bad long mustache to it, and they just kind of do this nod thing and that's it. Now, as we get towards the end of the episode, we get another scene where Pete is being introduced to this guy being called Jonathan, that allegedly is Josie's cousin. And it's one of the Asian guys. So the big thing, in case you weren't 100% sure about Josie, is that when Pete takes off, Josie closes the door. Josie kind of breaks character and tells this guy that we're being called Jonathan is that he's like, hey, is the business done? What's going on? And he's a bit of a jerk. So he seems like the fixer trying to come in and make sure everything's done. So there's bigger plans afoot that Josie's been working along, and she's asked, oh, will the sheriff be a problem? She's like, no, he means nothing to me. And you can tell she's not looking at him, but maybe she's got feelings, maybe she doesn't. To me, it doesn't seem like she does, but we'll find out. And of course, Cooper, who had been tagged with the task of trying to rescue Audrey on the down low, he had tried asking Harry earlier to meet with one of the better ones of the Bookhouse boys. Hey, give me your best one. And so Harry was like, yeah, I'll set it up for you. You just be at the Roadhouse and like 9:30, and I'll be there. And this is where Cooper's, the way Kyle MacLachlan plays a character is pretty interesting because he can be very enthusiastic and very spiritual. He seems competent. And that's one of the things we like about him. Even though we're not seeing the show 100% through his eyes, he's the one that kind of drives the narrative in a way, because he's the one pushing through the who killed Laura Palmer, which 12 episodes in, we don't know yet. Unfortunately, we're going to find out in a couple episodes, allegedly, and then we got the rest of the season to go on, and we'll talk a lot more about that in the next couple seasons. But the thing here that I want to mention about his character is that he sometimes seems a little gullible. Like he knew Audrey was hot for him, but he did the right thing, even though he admitted to her, hey, you're very intriguing, interesting. And of course, she's of age, but he felt moralistic about it. And in here, he's sitting, and what's kind of neat is when you look on the bench that he's sitting at there at the high top, he's alternating between, I think, peanuts, like the meat of a peanut or whatever. And he has this like upside down triangle where he's got this pattern to it. So it's like Pascal's triangle, inverted, if you will, and he just seems a little OCD-ish. But Harry walks in, and Cooper's like, hey, you got it all set up? And Harry's like, yeah. And you can just tell from the expression that Harry's like, it's going to be me, bro. Who were you expecting? But Cooper didn't get that. And he's like, so where's your guy? And Harry's like, well, he's here. And then Cooper's like, where? And Harry doesn't say anything, just gives him a blank look, and then it takes Cooper a second to realize it, and he points at him. He's like, oh, I got you. That's kind of cool. And I'm like, Cooper, when you have scenes like this, it's funny, but it makes me feel like you're a little stupid sometimes, or just gullible. I don't know. It just, for a guy that's as competent as he is, and while it was done funny, it kind of makes me go, well, we've seen where Cooper hasn't gotten everything right, which is kind of refreshing in a way too. Now, the worst scene really is this next one. It's the way we close out to leave on a cliffhanger, which happens in every episode. Is the diner's at night, the storm's starting to rage. Hank's closing up shop. It's quiet in there. It's dark. He answers the door. No one's there. Lights somehow mysteriously go out. And this guy that we've seen that's been called Jonathan, associated with Josie, is just there in the middle of the room. Him and Hank have one of the worst TV fights of all time. Hank moves about half speed, and then you slow that down. And Hank, we thought, was kind of a badass for the most part. And now we're like, wow. But there's a weird scene, too, because you just can't close out with a cliffhanger. We have to have a twist with some of these. Hank gets, I guess, his thumb injured or something, and it wasn't a very good edit to me. And Jonathan had reached down to him, and like you could see where the thumbs touch each other, saying something about being a blood brother. And he says, hey, next time I'm just going to take your head. Smashes Hank's flashlight. We fade to black, ending season 2, episode 4 of Twin Peaks. So like I said at the beginning, Professor Pixel and I have been reviewing Twin Peaks. We're going to continue that. Yeah. This week, so we had to redo it a couple times. So just second watch for me after about 30 years, and we love the show. It's interesting to see somebody as young as Professor Pixel in his early 20s pick out a lot of things that maybe someone like me that's a bit older than him, growing up in the 80s and watched it for the first time, see what's going on too. But I encourage you to go back and listen to all the episodes. There's a great deal of detail that we put in there as far as things that we seem to notice patterns at. Some of it we've gotten right, and there's been a few things we've totally whiffed on. That's the genius of Twin Peaks. You've got characters, some of them you can get emotionally attached to and then get pissed off at them, and then you find yourself being attached to other characters. You find yourself wanting to see the world of Twin Peaks through the eyes of some of these characters at different times. And if it's the first time you're watching it, season 2 is just going to get even crazier. Season 1 is fantastic. It's perfect television. It set the stage for lots of things to come. Extremely influential. Excellent, excellent TV. Can't do any better. Season 2 here has been, like I say, a bit more TV-fied, exemplified in this episode by a lot of the quick cuts, the really quick tonal shifts, and with the fact that we have a couple of writers helping out Mark Frost for the most part this season, as well as the occasional different director. You're going to get that with some of these episodes. So it'll be interesting to see what happens as we go into 5. Right now, I'm really interested in seeing the Audrey angle play out there with Harold. Some of the other stuff, I'm kind of in wait and see mode. And with Josie, even though I'm like, you bitch, I'm just waiting for the return of Catherine Martell, because no one does bitch better than Catherine Martell. And she was so good at it too. But yeah, lots of stuff to get entertained by watching. And as always, the music is fantastic in this as well. The score is terrific. Just some tones in the background, not too many of them. It's not overdone at all. And it's done at the right time. And yes, if you've watched it before and you're rewatching it again, I'm guaranteed there'll be something that you haven't seen before that you may have missed or went, oh, now I'm seeing it through different eyes. But there you have it, Season 2, Episode 4, Twin Peaks, Laura's Secret Diary. I'm your host, Rob. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. As always, guys, stay extreme. Good night.